Akadosh Boker Tov Masechet Ketubot Daf Amud Aleph 8a1. The Gemara says we were talking about what exactly are the Sheva Brachot. My Mevarech Amar of Yehuda says of Yehuda Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'akol bara lichvodo. That is the first of the blessings. Everything was created she'akol bara lichvodo. What does that mean? In the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, Mitsuyan, no problem. It's actually very interesting because when you're going to split up the Sheva Brachot, the last four Brachot are talking about the zivug of Ish v'Isha, which is the main part of the Birkat Chatanim, and the first two Brachot are to do with other things. And that's why the third Bracha starts with, again, Baruch Ata Hashem, but it's not considered, right, anymore like the Bracha Smucha Lechaverta. It's like another two concepts. So here it says the first one of the two Brachot, the Shakol Bara Lichvodo, is for the people, right, which are coming and doing chesed with the Chatam V'Kala. And that's why they came and they did that, right? And then he comes and he says, okay, that was going to be, okay, there's a whole thing here about, when do you do this? Okay, fine. That's going to be the first one of the Sheva Brachot. Second Bracha, yeah, also, Yetzirat of Adam Rishon. What is that? Yotzer Ha'adam. What is Yotzer Ha'adam? They created. So now the second bracha is Yoser Ha'adam. Okay, Mitsuyan. Now we start with, remember, this is the first two of the Sheva Brachot, right? Obviously, a Geffen is a Geffen. Now the last four are going to be with the concept of Chatam V'Kala. In the first two of the Sheva Brachot, which is Yotzer Ha'adam, Shakol Bara Lichvodo and Yotzer Ha'adam, have nothing to do with the actual Chatam V'Kala. Shakol Bara Lichvodo was for the people that are coming and joining in the Simcha Chatam V'Kala. Yotzer Ha'adam was on the creation of, right, Adam Arishon, which was even before Yetzirat Ha'isha. So since we're making a bracha on Yetzirat Ish v'Isha b'Birka Ba'ah, so they wanted to make this bracha as well on, first of all, Yetzirat Ha'adam, and then afterwards, now we're talking about Chatam V'Kala. So that's why it starts, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Right? One more time. If it's going to be bracha smucha lechaverta, so then you shouldn't have started Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, because it's a long bracha. Okay? But it would have been, the first one is a one-liner. One-liners always have, right, bracha at the beginning. Right? That's why Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Yotzer Adam, Baruch Ata Hashem Shakol Bara Lichvodo. Those are one-liners. One-liners always have Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. But now you have the next one. What's the next one? The Asher Yatzar. Right? The Asher Yatzar shouldn't have started with Baruch Ata Hashem. No, but it does because it's like a new concept. Okay? So the next one, third bracha. Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Asher Yasar et Adam betzalmo. Betzelem demut avnito. Vitkin lo mimenu binyan ezer. Right? We say ezer. Right? Binyan adea. Baruch Ata Hashem Yotzer Ha'adam. We all know the famous jokes many times when people come. Right, you're preparing for the Sheva Brachot of the wedding, and all of a sudden they come and they say, Baruch Ata. And everyone, we know who gave him the Sheva Brachot. And all of a sudden he says, right, instead of Shakol, Niya Bidvaro, and then he drinks. Yeah, and everyone, why? Because they think that he's going to do Shakol Bara Lichvodo. Or the same thing, Asher Yatzar. He goes to the washroom, comes back. Baruch Ata Hashem Asher Yatzar. What happened? Yeah. No, זה הבדיחות של... Fourth bracha. Sos tasis etagel akara. Here it says ha'akara. Interesting. Okay. בקיבוץ בניה לתוכה. במהרה בשמחה ובשמחה. ברוך אתה השם. משמח ציון בבניה. So, did you realize that the third bracha, which is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the human being in his fashion, in his form, and then he made him a binyan ezer adead. He made him a binyan. He made him right into the wife, which is going to now continue the construction. And therefore he says to Sos Adam, Sos Tasis is again talking about the happiness, the Tagel Akara, right? And we're talking about now that the Akara is going to be happy. The Kibbutz Banea, when you're going to bring in Nidchei Yisrael into Yerushalayim, Baruch Ata Hashem, Mesamech Tzion Bebanea. Fifth bracha, Sameach Tesamach Rim Ha'uvim. Yeah. So Yiratzon. That it should be sameach to samach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should make it sameach. Here we always have simcha. Yeah, reim ha'ovuim. Hey, he says the ones that they love each other, like reim, like good friends. The chatam v'akala, kesamechecha yetzirecha, just like the simchat Adam Rishon when you created him. Gan Eden, mikedem, and Gan Eden from the beginning in the east. Baruch Ata Hashem mesameach hatan v'chala. and the bracha acharona, which we also call bracha acharita. What is the last bracha? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher bara, which he created sason v'simcha. Whether again, these are all different synonyms for happiness. So you have sason v'simcha, hatam v'chala, gilad inad yitzav v'cheva avav v'achva shalom v'reut. Again, each one of these, it has asara leshonot shel simcha. You have 10 different leshonot of simcha. The kala, right? The kulam, sorry, are mitachsim for the chata v'kala. These 10 are actually a remez for the 10 chupot that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for Adam and Chava in Gan Eden. Did you hear? He did 10 chupot for them, right? And each one of the chupot was made out of a very expensive, we're going to say something very expensive. Okay, here, okay, the Ramban actually wants to write down that this bracha actually has 12 lishonot of simcha because chatam v'kala is also part of it. Chatam v'kala is also part of the simcha. So therefore, it's actually going to become 12. Okay, and he says over here that these are the keneged 12 chodshei hashana, that the chatan has to be misameach et ishto, because the person has to make his bride happy for 12 months, right? For the first year, v'simach et ishto shelakach. So therefore, those 12 months, there's going to be 12 lishonot. Ki kach ish isha chadasha v'simach et ishto shelakach. That's for the shana rishona. Okay, so Rabbi Krohn went and he said, where does chesed start? He says chesed starts outside. He says, but when a person does chesed at home, if he knows what's smart for him, he's going to do it anyway. Yeah. So he says, right, if a person wants a happy life, how do they say? Wife happy, life happy. Yeah, that's what they say. Happy wife, happy life. There you go. Yeah, so he says, Mehera Hashem Elokeinu yishama. Yeah, Be'arei Yehuda. ובחוצות ירושלים, כל סוף וכל צירה, כל חטא וכל כלה, כל מצלו חטאים מחופותם. We actually have a minhag of saying מחופותם. Right, that's what's brought down in the Ish Matziach. We say, right, חופותם. ונערים משתי נגינתם.
מחופותם או בחופתם?
מחופותם. That's a minhag. ונערים משתי נגינתם, ברוך אתה השם, משמח חתן עם הכלה. And we actually finish off with saying umatzliach, which means after we answer. Right after we answer the what's it called, then we actually come and we say umatzliach. So here actually, right, it's actually very, very interesting. Here it says, right, what are the actual differences? So he said, did you realize that 4 out of them they start with Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, which is basically number 1, 2, right, and 3 and 6, right? The 4th and 5th do not start because basically it's going to be sos lasis v'sameach t'samach, right? And not only that, the 4 last ones, right, is a chatima ktsara, which is Baruch atah Hashem mesameach tziyom meminah, Baruch atah Hashem mesameach chatan v'kala, v'chulu v'chulu. And the other ones, they don't. So he comes and he says like this, berachot that you do together one after another, the first one starts Baruch atah Hashem, and the other ones do not start with Baruch atah Hashem. Okay? Right? But you do finish with Baruch atah Hashem. Yeah? So he comes and he says, right, because this lashon, right, is actually going to be at the beginning of the beracha. So it's going to be Baruch atah Hashem. Shh. Right? So he says the first 2 are going to start Baruch atah Hashem as the berachot ktsarot. Anything which is berachot ktsarot, so they start with Baruch atah Hashem. Okay? Fine. Now we are going to continue. Okay?
So we didn't find the reasoning or...
Paying attention. Levi ikla leve Rabbi bi'ilulei Rabbi Shimon bereh. Levi was invited to the house of Rabbi by the Chatunah of his son, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi. Barich chamesh, and he did chamesh brachot, which means he did everything that we mentioned, except for the second one of Yoser ha'adam. Okay, Ravasi ikla leve Rav Ashi bi'ilulei demor bereh. So Ravasi came and was invited to the house of Ravashi when his son got married. Parikshit, and he did 6 brachot, and he did say Yotzer Adam. So what exactly is the machloket exactly? What was going on here that all of a sudden you're doing it, not doing it? What's going on, right? So he comes and he says like this. He says, Leima behaka mipageh. Why don't we say that this is actually going to be the machloket, right, between them, right? He comes and he says, right, as follows. He comes and he says, right, Mor savar chada yitzira havai. Now one of them holds that it was actually going to be one yitzira, which means that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, right, when he created Adam v'Chava, it was one goof with 2 partsufim. Yeah, that's what we say ala partsuf. Yeah, so one goof with 2 partsufim. and that's why he says Yotzer Ha'adam, right? Umor Sabar, and one of them says Shtei Yetzirot Havai. That there were actually two different Yetzirot. At the beginning was Adam min ha'afar, and afterwards was Chava from the Zanav, right, from the tail. And therefore it's like another Yetzirah. So because of that, you're going to have two different Berachot. So says the Gemara, no. Really, man, we're talking about, it was one Yetzirah. One of them is going to say that we're going after the Machshava. What was it, the Machshava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Right, that he wanted to do two Yetzirot Nifradot, one is the Zachar, one is the Nekeva. And the other one says that we go after the Ma'aseh. What is the Ma'aseh? In action, reality, what actually was created. Kihad Rav Yehuda Rami, was Rav Yehuda came and he asked a contradiction. Ketiv, it's written in the Pasuk, Vayivra Elohim et Adam et Tzalmon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu came and he created the Adam, which is Ha'adam. Ha'adam is Lashon Yachid, right? Which means that Hashem only created one body. Uchtiv, and it's written, Zachar u'Nekeva B'Ram, that he created two. So what's going there? Is it one? Vayivra Elohim et Ha'adam, one entity, or is it two? Zachar u'Nekeva B'Ram. So he says, HaKeitzad, well, how do you answer the stira? Batchila ala b'machshava, at the beginning, it went up in the machshava libarot shnaim, to come and to create two different entities, which is a male and a female. Ulvasof, but at the end, nivra echad, it was only going to be created one, which means guf echad with two different parsufim, which is zachar u'nekeva, and therefore it's written et ha'adam b'lashon yachid. Rav Ashi Ikla, yeah. Rav Ashi Ikla leve Rav Kahana. So Rav Ashi came and he visited Rav Kahana in the Simchat Nisuin Shelo. Yom HaKama Barich Kulu. The first day he went, he made all the Sheva Berachot. Mikam ve'elach, all of a sudden after that, Iyika Panim Chadashot. If there's Panim Chadashot, Barich Kulu. Right? He's going to make the bracha on everyone. Yeah, V'ilo, and if not, Apush Simcha Be'alma. Yeah? He's going to come and he's going to have more Simcha. What does it mean? Then he's only going to make Simcha B'Imono and Asher Bara. Right? What does that mean? We know that only there's Panim Chadashot do you make the Sheva Berachot. There's Panim Chadashot, right? Remember that. There's Panim Chadashot, then you're going to make it. Right? But if not, then all you say is Simcha B'Imono, which is the Zimun before the Sheva Berachot, and you're going to make the Beracha of Asher Bara. That's the only one that you do Beracha. From 7 days until 30 days, Ben Amar lehu mechamat hilula, uben lo amar lehu mechamat hilula, mevarech shasimcha b'imono. From 7 days until 30 days, whether you said it was for the chatuna or not, you still can say in the zimun shasimcha b'imono. Okay, but you do not make right after the becoming zon shebara. Mikam va'elach, but after 30 days, if you said that it was because of the Suda of the Chatan, meaning because of the Simchat Nisuin, you say Shasimcha B'Imono. But after that, you don't say Shasimcha B'Imono either. So says the Gemara, so 1 second. Let's pretend that it's already after a month and a half. And I'm going to come and I'm going to tell you, you know what? We're doing it because of the wedding. Right? Now, again, we already said that you don't do Sheva Berachot. We already said. But can you say Shasimcha B'Imono? So he says, until when? So Amar Rav Papi, Mishmed Rava, says Rav Papi in the name of Rava, for 1 year. For 12 months, you could come and you could say Shasimcha B'Imono, as long as you say that you're doing it because of the Chatuna. So says the Gemara, okay, fine. And from before the wedding, when do you start saying Shasimcha B'Imono? Right? Amar Rav Papa says, when you're going to put the barley inside of the water in order to make the shechad, in order to make the beer and all those things. Meaning that when they used to make the beer, they used to soak the barley, and that's how they made beer. So once they did that, which is mamash, meaning that it's already close to the time of the wedding, that's when they could already start doing the, the shasimcha b'imono. So ask the Gemara, is it so? Rav Papa yasek le'abba mor bereu barich mishat erusim. What are you talking about? Rav Papa, right, he himself, right, he went and he said, right, he was mishadech his a wife for Abba Mor, and they already started making, the berachot and all those things, right? He comes and he says, right, he comes and he already started doing all these things from the Shat Erusin. So answers the Gemara, Shani Rav Papa was different of a tarichle, because he says he did all the tzorchei Seuda and everything, right, and we're not going to suspect that maybe they're going to push it off. Ravina asek le livrei berav chaviva. So Ravina, he was Meshadech his son in the house of Rav Chaviva, Varich Mishat Erusin, and he was making the bracha from Shat Erusin. Amar, he said, Kimli begavai duradaru. I already know that they're not going to break off the marriage and everything, so don't worry about it. Lo yisei minta kadru. The second that he said that, what happened? They actually broke it off, and therefore they didn't actually do the wedding. And he went and he said, I'm certain that they're going to get married. So you could already start doing it from now, from the Shat Erusin. Start doing now Shasimcha b'muno. What happened? They broke off the engagement. Rav Tachlifa bar Marava ikla leBavel. Rav Tachlifa bar Marava, he went to Bavel, right, from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and Barishit Shit Achrita. He went and he did the 6 brachot arukot, which means he added on, right, Baruch Ta Hashem. But we don't pass on that, which means that whichever one that we already mentioned, whether it starts and finishes with Baruch Atah, but we don't add on to them whatsoever. Rav Chaviva ikle lebe mehula. Rav Chaviva, he went to a house of a milah, and he says, Shasimcha b'mono. But we don't pass on that. Because there, since they're trudim, meaning the child is crying. So because the child is crying, or there's tzar, so we don't say Shasimcha b'mono by a seudat brit milah. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav, says Rav Nachman Amar Rav, Chatanim min minyan ve'en avelim min minyan. Remember, a chatan could be part of the 10 people. We said that you need a Rebika Chatanim, 10 people. The Chatan ole min minyan, which means he's part of the 10. However, though, to do with Avelim, that you need 10 people for Bikat Avelim, the Avelim are not part of the 10. So, Meitve, we're going to ask a question. Chatanim Avelim min minyan, right? It says over here, Chatanim Avelim are part of the minyan. You just told me that an Avel cannot be part of the minyan. And here it's saying that an Avel can be part of the minyan. So says the Gemara, Matnintin karamita lederav. What you're bringing a braita to ask a question against Rav. Rav Tana Upalik. Rav is considered like a Tana, and therefore he could argue on the braita, which means don't worry about it. He could argue, and he's arguing. He's saying that what? That an Avel is not going to be considered part of the minyan. Itamar, it was also said, Amar Yitzhak ben Yochanan, says what he said in Yochanan, Chatanim min minyan ve'en avelim min minyan. A Chatan is part of the minyan of 10, but not the Avelim. So we're going to ask the following question: Chatanim avelim min minyan? Are you going to tell me Chatanim avelim they're going to be part of the minyan? Chet amubet. And so the Gemara, Kitanya hi b'Birkat Hamazon. When do we say this? In Birkat Hamazon. Ki ka'amar Rabbi Yochanan b'shura. What are we talking about? There's going to be a difference. When do we say that avelim are min minyan? In the Birkat Hamazon, which means the Avel himself is part of the minyan of the Shlosha. That if they went and they ate, they could make Birkat Hamazon. They could do Birkat Hazimun. But when was Rabbi Yochanan talking about? In the Shura. In the Shura is when they make the lines, right? And then the Avel goes in between, and then they come and they start saying, and all those things. There's a difference. So therefore, that's what he's saying. He's saying, Avel min minyan is a Birkat Hamazon. They're not going to be min minyan by the Shura. That which Rabbi Yitzhak says in Yochanan, that you're going to say the beracha of the Birkat Chatanim with 10 people. V'chatanim min minyan, and the Chatanim are going to be part of the minyan. U'Birkat Avelim b'asara, and Birkat Avelim need 10 people. Ve'en Avelim min minyan, but Avelim are not going to be part of the minyan. Beracha b'shura mi'ika. Is there a beracha bichlal in the shura? There's no beracha over there. What beracha is there? They don't make any beracha. They just say tanchumim, but there's no beracha. So says the Gemara, you're right. Ela ki kama Rabbi Yochanan. When does Rabbi Yochanan say that an avel etzmo is not part of the minyan? Barechava. What does it mean? To do with the berachot, which are said during the Rechovah Smucha Lahi, which means after the Kvura, during the Seudat Avrah, that's when they do make a bracha. Remember, Seudat Avrah is the first Seudah after the burial. So he says, Hada Amar, Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yochanan, that which Rabbi Yitzchak comes and he says, and then Rabbi Yochanan, you're going to make a Birkat Chatanim with 10 people. Kol Shiva, all the 7 days after the marriage. The Chatanim min minyan and the Chatanim min minyan, Birkat Avelim b'asara. Kol Shiva, also Birkat Avelim is going to be for 10 people, all the 7 days of the Avelut. Ve'en Avelim min minyan, and the Avelim are not going to be part of the minyan. Birkat Rechava Kol Shiva Mika, there's no Birkat Rechava, which means the Birkat Rechava is only Sudat Avrah. Sudat Avrah is only one Suda. It's only the first day, right after burial. They do Sudat Avrah, but it's not going to be 7 days. So what are you talking about then? So answers the Gemara, Mishekach alav Panim Chadashot. We're talking about Panim Chadashot. Here we're talking about Panim Chadashot for the Nichum Avelim. That means listen carefully. There's Panim Chadashot for the Simcha and Lahavdil Panim Chadashot the other way around. What does that mean? Ki had Rabbi Bar Abba Mikre Bnei Deresh Rakishava. Rabbi Bar Abba was mishamesh like a melamed. Right? He used to teach. Right? He was a teacher of the Torah Shebiktav to the children of Resh Lakish. And some people say that he was melamed Mishnah, not Mikra, but rather Mishnah to the son of Resh Lakish. Shachiv leYenuka. And there was a Benoat Katan of Rabbi Bar Abba passed away. So a small child passed away. Yom HaKama lo Oziel legabe. So the first day, Resh Lakish didn't go to Rabbi Bar Abba lenachamo. The next day, Lemachar, Dabre le Yehuda ben Nachman v'tugmare. right? He took his meturgeman with him, right? Which means that the Shakish used to be Doresh and Yudam Rachmani was the meturgeman. Okay, and he said, Amale, kuma ima minta kol kabel yinuka. He says, come and say something to do with the child, with the death of a child, right? That means when a child passes away, obviously it's not the same like when an adult passes away. So therefore, some come say tanchumim on a child passing away. So Patach ve'amar, he went and he said, Vayar Hashem vayinatz mikas banav u'vnotav. What does it mean that Kadosh Baruch Hu gets very angry, right? Mikas banav u'vnotav from the Kanata pasuk, right? Is the dor shavot minatzim. What does that mean? We're talking about a generation where the avot, right, are going to be getting angry at Kadosh Baruch Hu. Yeah, he comes and he says they're getting angry at Kadosh Baruch Hu. Koes al benehem avnoteim. So Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to be angry for their children and their daughters. Umetim kishem ktanim, and then they're going to be dying when they are going to be young children, which means that Kadosh Baruch Hu usually is not going to be miyaser the small children, right? But here he is. So he says over here like this. But some people say that he wasn't mamash a child. He was actually a bachur. Okay, he wasn't a child. He was a bachur. Okay, behachi kamalesh. He comes and he says like this. Al ken, and therefore he says a pasuk in Yeshaya. Al bachurav lo yismach Hashem. He says what on bachurei Yisrael? He's not going to be happy. V'titoma v'talmunata lo yirachem, and he's not going to come. And he's not going to have mercy on the yitomim v'almanot. Ki chulo chanef, right? Because there's not the inside is not the outside. It's chanupah. Chanupah is flattery. Umera, right? And from the Rasha, the whole pedaven nevelah, they're speaking about nevelot. The whole zoloshava po, but still, right? Even with these makot, they didn't retract from the wrath of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'od yadonetuya, and his hand is still outstretched. What does it mean? What does it mean? Ve'od yadonetuya. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rav. Listen to these words carefully. Everybody, Rav Chanan bar Rav says, Hakol yodin kala lama nichnesa lachupa. Everyone knows why a kala goes to chuppah. Right? Why is the kala going to chuppah? Because she's getting married, and then what happens after marriage, right? There's obviously ela kola minabel piv, but rather anybody that's going to be minabel piv. What does it mean minabel piv? That he's going to come and he's going to explain, right? About he's going to start being minabel piv. He starts saying, so he comes and he says, listen. He comes and he starts saying about what's going on, this and that. Afilu nechtam lo gzadino shel 70 shana letova. Even if the person is going to live for 70 years with beracha and with this and with that and with all the best, all of a sudden everything is switched on to the person because of nivul peh. So a person, all he has to do is menavel et piv. He comes and he speaks profane. He starts speaking about promiscuity and about all this nonsense. What happens? Kaddish. 70 years of beracha, nepach alav l'ra'ah. Yeah? So ata le'nechume, so says the Gemara, I don't understand it. Yeah, so he's coming to be menachem. So imagine somebody comes to a shiva house and he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he had such a wrath that he went and he boom, kaddish on the children, on the bachurim, on the this. Oh, well, you're coming to be menachem. You're coming to be mitzaed. So he says, no. Hachi kamal, this is what he told them. Chashivat latfu se'adara. You're kol kach chashuv in the shamayim that you and your children are nitpasim ba'avon ador, which means you're the kapara. Right? You're the kapara. Yeah, you are the atonement for the entire generation. So Elmaleh, he comes and he says, come and say something, right? Opposite the shevach, the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Patach ve'amar, so he said, Hakel HaGadol berov godlo, right? Baruch ata Hashem Elokeinu le'olam. Hakel HaGadol berov godlo, the God, the mighty God, with all his greatness, Adil v'chazak berov noraot, mechayem emitim ha'ma'amaro, oseh gedolot adem cheker. He's doing a gelot and cheker, ve'oseh niflot and mitzpat. Baruch ata Hashem mechayeh ha'metim. Fine. So Elmaleh comes and he says, "Kume minta keneged avelim." Come say something keneged avelim. Patach ve'amari, when he says, "Achenu am yugaim," right? Our brothers that they're already tired with their tzarot and the mdukain. Va'avel hazeh, right? He comes and he says, right? With this avel, tenunu v'chem lachkor zot zoti omed la'ad. Nativ hu Masechet Bereshit. This is going to be from Masechet Bereshit, right? So he says, just like the beginning. Kach l'shtei acharanim, totu l'shtei acharanim. Achenu kol hanechamon yenechem etchem. Baruch ata Hashem menachem avelim. Yeah, he comes and he says menachem avelim. So basically, he's bringing brachot, right, for everybody. Okay. Amar Rabbi says, Rabim shatu lema Rabim yishtu. Why did he say Rabim shatu? There were a lot of people that they drank, right? Because of this kosam of it. There were a lot of Rabim yishtu. Says no. Lo lema, we don't want to say this lashon. Mishteri shonim, that means a person, we want to say it in the past. We don't want to say it in the future. Because we don't want to make like a curse in the future. We want to say it in the past. A lot of people, they drank this kos of tanchumim. We don't want to say in the future that a lot of people are going to continue drinking the kos of death. You understand? It's not good. But he says, Mishteri shonim v'lema, meno mishachronim lo lema. Tamana b'shum lekish v'chen tana mishmed rabasi, le'olam aliftach adam piv l'satan. A person should never open up his mouth for the satan. Which means the person wants to say in the past. People have already drank from this kos of tanchumim. People have already, but not in the future. We don't want to do things in the future. Okay? He says, Micah, what's the pasuk? What does that mean? When we say in Hechal over there, it says over there in Hechal, right? Sorry, not in Hechal. This is in the Haftarav Chazon. So he says, Kisdom hayinu la'amora diminu. We were like Sodom, we were like Amorah. What does Hashem answer us? Maya dale, shimud v'rashem ketzinet Sodom. Which means that if you open up your mouth and you say that you are, so that's what you're going to become. You're going to become like that. So every person should never open up his mouth for bad things. Elmaleh, he comes and he says, fine. So look, basically, did you realize that he's coming to give the rashot for every single person? They're coming and saying, Yo b'chavod, speak to the avelim, speak to the shevach v'chava kodesh baruch hu, the avelim, the people which are menamachamei avelim now. So Patach v'amar, he says, Achenu gomlei chasadim, my brothers gomlei chasadim, b'nei gomlei chasadim, the children gomlei chasadim, hamachzikim b'rito shel Avraham, that continue the brit of Avraham Avinu to do chesed. Shleimar ki dati v'tadman asher tzaveh b'nav. We're talking about shemru derech l'som mitzvot kol mishpat. Achenu, my brothers, balagmul, right? Balagmul, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he always gives the payback. Yeshalem lachem gmulchem, right? He should pay you back for all your rewards. Baruch atah Hashem meshalem hagmul. Elmaleh, he comes and he says, okay, now say something for all of Israel. Patach v'amar, he comes and he says, Ribon ha'olamim, Master Universe, pedeh ve'atzel, right? Redeem and save. Malet v'osher tamechai yisrael min hadever. Save all of the nation, we said, from the pestilence, min hacherem, from the sword, min habizah, from the booty, min shetafon, min lekom, from the different shidafones. If you remember makat, when all the grains and everything they become bad, min yirakon, from also this type of like a sickness, and all the calamities which come into the world. Terem nikra, before we call out, you should answer us. Baruch Hashem, that you stop the magefa. Amar Ula v'amli le'matzita tanan. So Ula says in the matzita tanan, do you know that there's 10 cups of wine that they drink in the house of the Avel? This is based upon a pasuk that says Tenu shechal le'oved. What does that mean? That you're going to give, right? That somebody which is, you give them to drink, right? Right? And wine to the maneh nefesh. So it says over here, there's going to be 10 cups. 3 cups of wine before the eating. So way it opens up the appetite, because if not, they're not going to eat anything. 3 in the middle of the meal, in order that it should make the food come and digest. And 4 after the achila. One of them keneged hazan, which is the birkat hazan. Echad keneged birkat haaretz nodelecha, right, which is Yoshua. Echad keneged bonei Yerushalayim, which is the third beracha birkat mazon. Echad keneged atov v'metiv, and one of them keneged atov, which is the fourth one. Hosifo lehem arba'a, and then they added on another 4. Right? Because before they used to actually drink each one the beracha miyuchedet. They added on hosifo lehem arba'a, echad keneged chazanei hayid, one in keneged the chazanei hayid, which they used to do the kfurot hametiv and all these things. What is it, like, chavela kedisha? Echad keneged parnasei hayid, one of them keneged the parnasei hayid that they used to pay the money for the chevra kadisha and for the burials. Echad keneged bet hamikdash, one of them keneged bet hamikdash. Echad keneged bet gamliel, one of them keneged bet gamliel. Hitchilu hayu shotin mushakrin. So then all of a sudden they were drinking so many cups of wine. Imagine 14 cups of wine. They used to start getting drunk. So they brought it back to what it was, only 10 cups. Because if there was so many cups of wine, imagine 14 cups of wine, the guy's going to be gone. So therefore, they put it back to 10. They didn't want to make it. What does it mean, Rabbi Gamliel, now that they had a cup parallel to Rabbi Gamliel? What does that mean? Right? Because remember, here, did you realize what's going on? They needed to open up the appetite. They needed to do all these things. Obviously, nowadays, we don't do these things, right? But this is all these halachot, right, that they would do for Sudat Abras. So he comes and he says like this. He says, what was Rabbi Gamliel? Tanya is learned to write, but do you know that the kfura was even worse than his death? Meaning, because they used to, it was a bizayon. They used to come, they used to take him out to be buried. It was so difficult for the burial was harder for them than the actual death. Meaning the death is already one thing, but the burial was harsher, right, than the death. I said because it's a bizayon, because the way they used to take them out, right? It was a begadim. What? Because they used to take them out with begadim, which were very expensive, and therefore they used to pay a lot of money for it. And nowadays it's the same thing. Nowadays, how much is a burial? Right? A person dies, it costs nothing. A person burial, how much does a burial cost? Thousands of dollars for what? Right? It doesn't make sense. But it's a money-making business. That's what it is. Ad shayum anichim oto baruchim. People used to come, they used to run away from the deceased. Why? It was so much money. They used to run away until Rabbi Gamliel came. What Rabbi Gamliel came? Nahag kalut be'atzmo. He went and he ordered that they should bury him. Simple linen clothing. Nowadays they use the linen clothing, right? And they still charge you the thousands of dollars, right?
But it's the same tachachim.
Exactly, the same tachachim, right? Which is the same linen clothing. That's just supposed to make it that it's cheaper. But I don't know, right? So from then on, everybody started using klip ishtan. So once everybody started using the klip ishtan, so now what happened was that all of a sudden now it became very, very cheap. So Rav Papa says, now they come and even use tzad bar zuza, which is basically even a beged of kambus, right, which is gas. So Amar Rabbi Elazar says Rabbi Elazar, okay, this is now a new Gemara to do with Petach Patuach Matzati, and we'll continue with Hashem tonight.